So I do want to invite Omer Zucker, who is a Pantera product manager. He has more than 15 years in InfoSec experience. Actually, he was the former of Security Intelligence Center, led in Mercedes-Benz. And also he served as in the IDF as an officer in one of the intelligence units, but he will not talk about it. He will focus about ransomware ready and how to change from awareness of ransomware to become a ransomware ready. So, Omer?
Thank you, Leo, for the for the opening. Very happy to be here today. So I think first, in terms of agenda, we are going to discuss about automated security validation and explain a bit what does it mean. Next step will be to discuss the ransomware problem and how we engaged it in Pantera, how we solve it from our end. And at the end, I hope it will be to see an interesting demo from our product. So let's start.
You have the control, Omer.
Oh, okay, perfect.
But be gentle.
I'm trying to click. It's not working.
You are in control. Just click on the mouse or down.
Oh,
yes.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about automated security validation and what does it mean when we say so. So I guess many of you in this call have been in the situation that you have to run some tool in order to expose, identify, detect your vulnerabilities in your environment or even your assets by some vulnerability scanner or something similar. And you probably got flooded with a huge list of maybe dozens, hundreds, or thousands of vulnerabilities, and you didn't know where to start from. And it's a bit, it is a bit sucks because you get a long list and you want to be really active and have some actions. And actually, at this point, when a typical vulnerability scanner stops its work, Pantera starts. So Pantera takes these kind of long list of vulnerabilities, flows, misconfigurations for in the real world, I would say, and it starts to exploit it by a real exploitation that is actually being developed by the team of Spivy, who's also speaking here today. And Spivy's team is actually developing on daily and weekly basis new capabilities, exploits, and payloads that actually engaging these kind of vulnerabilities. And we see that from the flood and long list that we see at the beginning, we got only maybe several or even dozens of vulnerabilities that are actually exploited. And also, if you read some stats from the past 2 years, you can see that only 2 to 5 or maybe 2 to 10% of the vulnerabilities that are getting published on daily basis are actually can be exploited. And the output of this process, or maybe one of the goals of this process, is to perform a real validation of security controls. So imagine that you have an AV, an EDR, firewall, whatever, you name it. And Pantera actually tries to exploit and really validate your security controls. But it's also not enough because you got the list, but you want to know with what to work and where to start. So Pantera actually takes these lists, these kind of lists automatically, and start to prioritize based on different kind of parameters, like I guess you heard about CVSS and MITRE, and we take the likelihood and probabilities and the distribution of the vulnerabilities in the network. And then we get a really refined and updated list that is really focused and tell you what to do. You need to start with 1 to 3 and not with thousands. And the next step will be a remediation with concrete actions and mitigation efforts that you need to engage in order to resolve these vulnerabilities. So to summarize, these are the 4 milestones, I would say, that are assemble our automated security validation platform: exposure, validation, prioritization, and remediation. And you can guess that we are doing so, as I mentioned, by real exploitation. But when I'm saying real exploitation, behind the scenes, we are using many kinds of techniques and procedures that are actually aligned with the MITRE framework, starting from network recon, sniffing, cracking, relay, lateral movement, PE, and many more techniques. And this entire life cycle is actually reflects in a really good way what we are doing in our product and how we can validate for real security controls. But this was just the background about automated security validation. And now we are going to move on to the ransomware ready. And let's talk about the problem. I guess all of you heard read the news on daily basis, and you see that every Monday and Thursday we have a new victim somewhere. So here I just put different types of examples of major events in the wild, including the Cassia attack, in which the attackers demanded $70 million payment. This was the Our Evil group, and also the JBS at the bottom left that paid $10 million to Our Evil group also. And we see more and more events, mainly I would say even in the US in the past 3 months. And at the bottom right, you can see actually a very interesting statements by the FIRE ICO Kevin Mandia that says that the rise in ransomware requires strong government response. And actually, the White House took one step forward and published some memo with 5 best practices on how to mitigate, and also the FBI was involved. And we see that a lot of involvement and engagement from the US government with the victims. So let's talk about some stats, and actually correlates with what Leah also talked about. So ransomware is not going anywhere. We see that this is like immense risk and actually evolving and growing all the time. And the stats saying that $20 billion, a huge amount of money. This is the amount that projected amount for ransomware damages. And I'm not talking about the payments that the victims pay. I'm talking about the overall picture, including the reputation and the resource allocation that the victims need to engage. So all this wonderful package is a huge bucket of money. We witnessed that more than doubled. This is the percentage of number of organizations impacted by ransomware. And this is compared to 2020. And we see the stats are always growing from month to month. And this is really, really frightening. And the last one is more than 50% of all cyber insurance claims accounted for ransomware. This is also interesting and correlates to risk management and how we need to treat victims, and so on. On the right, you can see some examples from the different different kind of ransomware groups, really famous ones. We will talk about two of them today: Maze, Ryuk, REvil, Zeppelin, and Dharma. And this is the average cost for each one of them. So let's talk about how Pantera, how we engage this problem. So as I mentioned, as a part of our approach, we constantly adding to our product offensive techniques and procedures by our amazing research team led by Spivi here. And at the beginning, we thought that, okay, ransomware is another cool new cyber innovative technique that we need to add to our product. But eventually we understood that this is not enough, because ransomware is not a single technique. It's actually a huge world that comprises of different threat actors and innovative capabilities that we need to approach differently. Okay, so actually at the end, we thought that it might be great to take the most dangerous and distributed threat actors. I'm talking about the Maze and REvil, and actually mimic the exact behavior as they do, but for real, and actually to do it automatically. So we took these threat actors, we analyzed them, and we developed an automatic framework for ransomware that mimics the same behavior, including the different phases of the attack, starting from launching the attack, process injection, exploitation, encryption, data exfiltration, and much more. I will deep dive in the demo. And the goal the goal of this framework is not actually to just to have cool new techniques and deploying them in our product, is actually, as I mentioned, to validate our customer security controls. So when you deploying this product in some environment and you will click it, and it's really straightforward. I won't touch configurations today, but once deploying it, you actually can test and validate whether your security controls across different layers are configured properly. So you can see that your EDR, we have many customers that think that they bought the most amazing technologies out there. We have EDR XYZ, we have firewall, we have some WAF, we have amazing solutions. But at the end of the day, these kind of amazing solutions are not configured by those who operates them. And this is the problem. The problem is the human being eventually. And by Pantera, by this framework specifically for ransomware, you can validate that they are. And of course, the output will be by the system or some report that indicates about AV and EDR bypass, the vulnerabilities that we found within that process, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, guided remediation. Let's take one step forward and see some under the hood view, specifically of the Maze campaign, just to go over the overall flow and how we implemented it. So you have the big picture. So we're starting from the assuming breach approach. We're already in the network, and we are starting with some credentials and initial access. By these credentials, we are starting to perform host enumeration over the network. We have an extensive RCE framework, including different executors, downloaders, many kinds of techniques, starting from Bits admin, curl, CMD, and you name it. Then we're going to the next phase of like on the host itself, performing file enumeration and encryption with the real algorithms of Maze or REvil whatsoever. Data exfiltration, starting communicate with some CNC, And at the end, since our product is safe by design and we cannot allow any discrepancies in our customers, we perform a cleanup that includes a complete cleanup of all our residues. And all these goodness, I would say, is aligned actually with the MITRE framework, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. If there are any questions before the demo, maybe this is a good time. I don't see any.
No, there is no questions. Maybe further on. Let's continue.
Okay. So Leo, actually, I need to.
Yes, I will stop
control,
sharing.
yeah, perfect. And need your approval to share.
Yes, you can share.
Perfect. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay. Just a sec. Okay, so you can see Pantera product. So I'm not going to brief the entire product because it will take some time, but I do want to show you today some specific test, a ransomware ready test that we performed in our lab. So all the environment you will see here is, of course, virtual, artificial in our lab. So no customer or any related data here. So you can see here that actually after doing some quick configurations with the click of a button, it's really straightforward, really easy. You just click run the attack, and Pantera starts its journey and actually attacking for real the network. So no simulation, no like exploits or some similarities. It's the real thing, real exploits, real payloads, as you can read and download from GitHub, for instance. And of course, some of them are proprietary for the product. So you can see here a test in which we discovered 6 devices in the network. 5 devices are workstations, 1 server. You can see that Pantera achieved 34 achievements in total that are classified to 4 different severities: critical, high, medium, and low. And here you can see the achievements. So let's deep dive on the attack map. And this is really cool because here you can see the actual flow that Pantera managed to initiate. So as I mentioned on the slides, we've started with some credentials provided by the user as an entry point. From the 7.1 to 3.4, I won't talk about each one of them, but this is actually our extensive RCE framework, which is really dynamic. You can see that we open a remote channel, we execute code remotely on the host, and the payload established connections with Pantera, and we upload the malware to host. And you can see that by performing all these actions, no AV or EDR was detecting us in this case. And here starts actually the interesting part that is related to the ransomware. So once we uploaded the malware to host, specifically here by some LOLBus payload, Pantera actually generated an encryption key. You can see here that the ransomware family that we run here was REvil. The encryption algorithm was Salsa 20. This is the original and real algorithm we implemented A to Z. And Pantera encrypted a keybase 64 encryption key on the host. By doing so, we started to enumerate the files on the host. As I mentioned, since we are safe by design, we cannot manipulate the original files. Since we cannot corrupt or manipulate an original file on the customer's environment, so Pantera actually enumerate these files and create copies, as you can see here, like doc1.txt with a proprietary extension. Here, in this case, abbreviation of Pantera backup. So the files themselves are real. This is the original files on this specific host, 3.9.9. But the files you see here, the original path was like administrator documents, and Pantera created a backup file so we can start our manipulation. The next step will be performing the encryption. So we approached these previous files and we started to encrypt them. The encryption mode here was fast. It means that we actually, in this case, we actually encrypt only part of the file, not the entire binary. This is like a really common configuration field that is actually being performed by both our Evil and Maze. As I mentioned, this is the Salsa 20 is the algorithm, and you can see here that the file extension was actually changed. So we have managed to perform the encryption, and now we see that doc1 is encrypted by this extension. The next step will be, and this is really cool, since as I mentioned, we mimic the exact behavior. So the next 3 steps are actually authentic IOCs that are used by our Evil specifically. And if you will Google it, for example, and you will write our Evil IOCs, you will see that our Evil are actually creating configuration in Windows registry by writing these same keys. So we took the original original keys, and we actually writing them in the registry. And you can see here the values and the path and the type and everything. So this is the first IOC. And as I mentioned, we do validation. So we expect that some EDR, for instance, that is deployed on that host will trigger this, will detect this, or even block such an IOC. And this is the shield here resembles a vulnerability, and we see that that the AV didn't block our malicious payload in this case. The 2 next ones are also unique and proprietary IOCs that are related to our Evil. This is the mutex creation. So our Evil, in practice, actually creating a mutex object, and this is the you can see the object name here. And the next one will be emulation of shadow copies deletion, and this is a proprietary command being performed by our Evil. You can see here a tiny flag, the question mark. So we don't want to actually delete the shadow copies in our client's hosts. So we're performing the command with this flag only to check that, as I mentioned, the EDR or the AV catching or blocking the run of this command specifically. Here is the VSS admin data.exe. Last but not least, since we have completed all the required actions that Pantera have aimed to achieve, so we are triggering here an achievement that says that Pantera completed the ransomware attack kill chain on that host, specifically for 3.9.9. And if we had many hosts in the network, so you will see a multiple achievements, of course. So this is our end-to-end attack flow. And also on the arrows between every achievement, we have some analytics, including the adversary level. So how complicated or how much effort we put in order to go from object A to object B, from achievement A to achievement B. This is the adversary level, the related MITRE techniques for the actions we performed, and of course the timing and parameters. Another cool thing here is the MITRE matrix. So for each test, we are displaying the MITRE techniques and procedures that were performed by Pantera. And of course, we have a report that aggregates all the security findings for executives and some stats. Maybe to show just a quick example. So you will see an introduction about the flow, some context about our evil, some stats, and aggregation about resilience score of the client, the action success rate regarding the actions and the MITRE, and so on. I won't talk about the entire report today. That's all. Thank you.